The Bureau has followed the manufacturing industry for a long time, but more recently it has put special emphasis on tracking the forest products industry, especially since the Bureau is located here in Missoula. Chuck Keegan, we know, has done that for many, many years, and now Todd Morgan is in charge of that program. Todd is a forester himself. So with a view of both the manufacturing sector more broadly and the forest products industry more specifically, Mr. Todd Morgan.
Thank you, Ian. And thank you all for sticking around here. There are a couple people from the Bureau that I want to particularly thank. Of course, Ian already mentioned Chuck Keegan, my predecessor at the Bureau and my mentor in many ways. Also, the forest industry and manufacturing research staff includes Bob Campbell, Steve Hayes, Steve Robertson, Eric Berg, Colin Sorensen, and Charlie Gale, and they're all here today to help out, and I appreciate their help getting the information together for the talk. I do have some good news to share with folks on manufacturing and wood products, so I hope you don't look at me as the new Dr. Doom, since I'm not a doctor, but I could play one. All right, big picture, manufacturing in the U.S. Manufacturing represents about 8.5% of private employment in the U.S. In Montana, manufacturing represents about 4%. Now, what we've seen in U.S. manufacturing employment, and I think people are familiar with this trend, is that in the U.S., manufacturing employment has been declining. And you can see that blue line on the graph. It's come down quite a bit since 1990. Now, kind of one of the pieces of good news here is that in both Montana and the U.S. as a whole, 2010, we saw slight gains in manufacturing employment. In fact, in the January 19th issue of the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. Manufacturing employment gain actually made front page news because that's the first gain we've seen in manufacturing employment countrywide since 1997. And as you can see in Montana, we have had some periods of manufacturing growth in the state, both during the 1990s and 2000 through 2007. And, we do have this a data point of an uptick here for 2010. Is that a new trend? I don't know yet. It's too early to tell. A little recap on manufacturing in Montana during 2010. It was better than 2009 for most firms in the state. There was a net gain, I'll say that again, a net gain of about 200 jobs in manufacturing in Montana, despite the losses we saw in wood products. About a quarter of the firms in the state did report increasing their employees, and 40% said they had no change in the number of employees. Also, 70% of the firms in the state reported that they didn't do any curtailments of manufacturing operations during the year. And 94% of them said they didn't reduce any capacity. They didn't eliminate any of their lines. Now, 50 to 70% of the firms reported increases in either sales, production, or profits for the year. And along the lines of kind of this idea of where we're going in the future, 40% of manufacturers in the state said they did make major capital expenditures. So that's good news as folks are looking forward to a rebounding economy. There's a little pie chart that kind of describes shows the major manufacturing sectors in the state. There are about 20,000, almost 21,000 manufacturing employees in Montana. And over 90% of the manufacturing firms in the state employ 20 or fewer people. So we're very much a small manufacturer. We're heavy to small manufacturers, let's say it that way. In 2010, we did about $10 billion in sales from manufacturers in the state, and that's up from 2009. Also in 2010, employees at manufacturing facilities earned about $1 billion in labor income, and that's roughly the same as it was in 2009. Statewide, you can see these largest sectors there in the pie graph. Petroleum and coal became number one in 2010, and that's the first year that it passed wood products, paper products, and furniture. Wood, paper, and furniture was second in the state at 17% of labor income during 2010. And if we were to compare this pie to what it was 10 years ago, the wood product sector was about 38% slice of that pie 10 years ago. And if we went back just 20 years ago, wood products was about a 49% slice of the pie. So, what's been going on? Well, adjusted for inflation, the pie has grown somewhat. It's grown 16% from 1990 to 2010 in inflation-adjusted dollars. But you can see that as the wood and paper slice has contracted, some of these other slices have gotten bigger. And some of those have gotten bigger in real dollar terms, and others have just gotten bigger as a proportion because of the contraction in the wood products sector. Now, these major sectors play a different role, have different importances in the different economies as we go around the state to different cities and counties. So here for Missoula County, we see that here are the pie charts for 2008, but in 2008 and 2009, Missoula County was the fourth largest manufacturing center in the state. And that's almost certainly still the case for 2010. There were about 2,800 employees in 2008, about $138 million in labor income. Manufacturing represented about 15% of the county's economic base. Now, county-level numbers from the Bureau of Economic Analysis are not yet available for 2009-2010. But by sector, you all will know, and if I could show you a 2010 pie, that wood and paper slice would be smaller, and the total pie would actually be smaller this year for Missoula County. That wood and paper furniture, probably 50 to 60% slice of that pie, of that piece of pie, was Smurfit stone. So that has had a major impact on our manufacturing base in the county. Now, the other sectors there, of course, my favorite being the food and beverage sector, that has grown somewhat. Employers like Big Sky Brewery, Barron, Kettle House, Coca-Cola Bottling, Big Sky Bottling, meat processing and packing, and a lot of bakeries in town that I enjoy too. We have chemicals. There are also a major chemicals and plastics, things like Hexion, diversified plastics, ready-mix cement, and then other. The other slice is pretty big. It's going to grow, and that really is very diverse. It contains industries like sporting goods, aircraft parts, guns and gun parts, printing and publishing, fabricated metals, textiles, computers, machinery. So other is quite diverse. Missoula County manufacturing employment and labor income has been severely impacted by, again, the losses in the forest products industry. And it wasn't just Smurfit this year. It's been a string. There's the Stimson Stud Mill in 2008. There were 2009 curtailments at wood products mills. And compared to 2008, the net Missoula County wood products employment has fallen by at least 400 employees. And the labor income has fallen by at least $32 million per year. Now, I'm kind of talking about wood. I'm going to transition here, talk a bit more about the Montana forest industry in 2010. It was the fifth straight year of declines in the industry. Again, we did see some lasting impacts of what went on in 2009 and previous years. Employment overall in wood products in Montana was down about 9% from 2009. We knew this was coming because we knew about the Smurfit closure and how it would impact the count of employment at the end of the year. Product sales were down about 40% below the 2009 level. Now, 2009's wood product sales level was already pretty low. But for 2010, it was about $325 million out of the wood products industry in the state. Historically, that number since 1970 to about 2007 was over $1 billion. So a major decline there. But I really hope, and I think that we have reached the bottom of that trough. Now, the lumber and plywood sales values were actually up in 2000, or during 2010. They were up from 2009. That was due in large part to higher prices for lumber, about 25% higher lumber price on average. Lumber production in this state was also up about 15% from where we were in 2009. Again, that's coming off a very low trough, but it is trending up. Timber harvest volume was likewise up in 2010 compared to 2009. But as many of you know, timber harvest volume in the state has been going down since the 1990s, and 2009 was the lowest record year we had for timber harvest in the state since 1945. And in 2010, even though it came up 12%, it was still the second lowest year. I'm going to talk a little bit about our survey. Every year, every December, we conduct a survey of manufacturers throughout the state of Montana. And the Bureau's survey research program actually helps my program conduct the survey. We contact folks, manufacturers throughout the state. We ask them a series of open-ended and multiple choice and kind of ranking questions. We ask them about the current year and the coming year. This year we had 146 firms participate, and that was a response rate of over 70%. So we're pretty proud of the feedback we get from these folks. Looking at the forest products industry's responses, we can see that the firms are slightly less optimistic than last year, but still, over 80% of the wood products firms that we surveyed expect 2011 to be better or the same as 2010. Less than 20% expect it to be worse. And there was only one less firm that responded to us this year than last year. Last year we had 47 firms respond. This year we had 46. Almost 80% of the firms do not expect to make any major capital expenditures in 2011 among wood products manufacturers. But 50% of them do expect increases in their gross sales value. So there is optimism in manufacturing in general and within the wood product sector in Montana. On the employment outlook, I'll tell you, first of all, right now we have about 6,800 private sector forest industry workers. That includes everything from loggers and foresters to mill workers. It does not include state and federal agency folks. The employment outlook among Montana's wood products industry is largely unchanged. About 60% do not expect to increase or decrease employment during 2011. And only 7% expect a decrease in the number of employees. So that's a pretty good outlook for employment. All right, so what are we expecting? Montana and the U.S. forest industries are slowly recovering from a very serious downturn. That downturn was primarily in new home construction, which really impacted the wood products industry here. We saw a rise in the Asian markets, particularly the Chinese demand for lumber and logs during 2010. That was one of the things that really helped boost the price of lumber this year. Now, how long this Chinese demand will continue and the impacts that we're going to feel here in Montana, that still remains to be seen. New markets are emerging. Of course, we've all heard of biomass energy and biofuels, carbon credits. These markets are emerging slowly, not just here in Montana, but around the U.S. And I would like to add that Montana does still have a substantial integrated wood products industry that includes everything from the foresters and loggers in the field to the mills and the users of mill residue. But that industry is undergoing change. Again, new home starts are expected to increase during 2011, and some gain in momentum is expected in 2012. In Montana, now the timber harvest and lumber production volumes are again likely to increase for 2011, but they're going to remain below these historical averages, and we're going to be coming up from a pretty low trough. Employment is also, it's likely to remain low, but again, because of these permanent shutdowns, but there is optimism that we're going to have some more employment as mills bring back on lines to meet, hopefully, what we see as increasing demand for wood products. Now, I expect that forest management activities are going to become more expensive for landowners, whether it's a private landowner or a public landowner. If you want to do management activities on your forest land, whether it's thinning or salvaging timber, salvaging beetle kill, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. And that has a lot to do with the loss of infrastructure. The distance to mills are increasing. That means the haul distance. It's going to cost more money to get the wood out of the forest and taken care of, and to a mill to process it. So we're not out of the woods yet, and there's two meanings to that. And one is the struggles are not completely over for Montana's wood products industry. And on the flip side of that is, yes, we still have an industry that is working in the forest and it is working in the mills. Now, looking at the manufacturing forecast in general, better conditions are expected. The expectations are for operating conditions to improve during 2011. Recovery in Montana is expected to be somewhat slow. Again, we've had major permanent closures in the wood products sector. They're pretty large. They've impacted the industry. They've impacted the manufacturing sector as a whole. A lot also depends on the broader U.S. economy as a whole, including the U.S. housing market. I will mention that among the firms that we surveyed, two major issues really showed themselves, and it really ties into the rest of our program today, is that workers' comp is a huge issue to a lot of manufacturers in the state, and so is the cost of health insurance. Montana's outlook for manufacturing is largely unchanged from last year. 85% expect 2011 to be the same or better than 2010. Machinery and equipment manufacturers are among the most optimistic. 65% of machinery and equipment manufacturers that we surveyed indicated they expect better conditions for 2011. And some of those machinery equipment manufacturers are in what we consider the high-tech sector. Other things that are in that high-tech would be computers and electronics. Only 13% of Montana manufacturers expect 2011 to be worse than 2010. And I will add that of that gold bar that says 13%, roughly half of those firms were wood products firms. All right, so what about manufacturing employment? We can see it's a bit more optimistic than last year. For 2011, we're expecting to see increases in manufacturing employment. About a third of manufacturers in the state expect to increase their number of employees, and only 7 expect to see a decrease. Statewide, we expect to see manufacturing increase some, but again, it's going to stay lower. It's not going to bounce right back up. Now, that outlook for manufacturing is not necessarily the same at the local level. And here I have the Missoula County manufacturing outlook for 2010. You can see that overall, it's a little bit better outlook compared to the state. And it's much better than Missoula's outlook last year. More manufacturers in Missoula than statewide. So 56% in Missoula County versus 45% statewide expect a better year. And only 11% versus 31% last year think things are going to get worse. 56% of manufacturers in the county also expect to increase employment for 2011. And only 7% expect to see a decrease in employment. So again, the county has been hit hard over the past 4 to 5 years with the declines in wood products. Smurfit Stone was kind of just the last one in a recent string of closures that we've seen. And I'll mention that Ravalli County has also felt this wood products decline in the log home industry in particular. But at the end of the year, at the end of 2011, when we add things up again, we do expect to see that sales, production, employment, and profits will likely be higher for Missoula County manufacturers than in 2010. But again, manufacturing is probably not going to bounce up to those pre-recession levels, but we do expect to see some increases. And with that, I thank you for your time and welcome any questions that you may have.
Todd, as we look at that state pie chart, it is some good news that at least the pie is larger. Nobody wanted Smurfit Stone to go away. We didn't want to see that kind of contraction, and that's the reason why some of those other sectors came up. But nonetheless, I think I mentioned earlier, diversified portfolio. Statewide, that looks like a pretty balanced chart. Is there any merit to that? Is there any benefit to that despite the losses and the pain that we felt?
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the diversity in the pie chart within the manufacturing sector is a good thing to see. The way we got to that diversity, I don't think is a good thing. The fact that what we had was one slice of the pie shrinking, making the other pieces appear bigger, is probably not the way we want to go about it. And certainly on the ground, the wood products industry really provides outlets for landowners to be able to recover some of the money they need to spend when they want to do treatments on their land. So it really is it represents the ability to do management of our forest, is having the wood products industry here. So we've lost some of that capability.
All right, Todd, thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
We now are going to move into the purely local part of the program, and as we do that, I want to acknowledge our local sponsor for this year's Economic Outlook Seminar in Missoula, and that's First Interstate Bank. They are represented on the placards that are on the tables, and we do thank you, First Interstate Bank, for your support of this on our home court, as it were, here in Missoula. This is by far the largest gathering in terms of audience that we have on this tour, and I think when all is said and done, this may actually be a record crowd for one of these. So thank you, First Interstate Bank, and thank all of you for your attendance. Yeah, go ahead and clap for the hometown. All right, let's bring Dick King up now. Dick, of course, is the president and the CEO of the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation. Dick, we've heard a lot of these overviews from, high in the atmosphere, looking at the state, looking at us. Give us a view from the streets.
I'll give it my best. Thank you, Ian, and it's a pleasure to see you again, doing a great job, and thanks to the Bureau for a wonderful presentation, very informative, and every year it's been a pleasure to see you come up to the challenge of trying to make sense of all this. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the status of that mill out at Frenchtown, and since the acquisition was announced, there may just a perspective, and then I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with some economic development activity, how we're going to enhance our economic development effort in the local area, and why that's important. So let's see, I press this one?
I think so. I haven't actually worked.
There we go. Well, I don't need to belabor the data here, but it was a big setback when Smurfit closed its mill. Management of the company told us that it was an extremely close call. It was down to the last 15 minutes where they made the decision. Unfortunately, they closed it, and the economic impact was severe. In addition to the jobs and economic impact, there's the big question, what happens to 3,200 acres? High potential value with water, wildlife. The future of the Grass Valley is a big part of the future of the Missoula Valley. So there's a lot at stake with what happens. I don't know who heard of Rock 10 before they announced the acquisition. Anybody hear of them? Kind of a new name, but a few of us knew. Again, some of the management that I've been talking to know the people at Rock 10. So is there an opportunity here? Smurfit has had 3 letters of intent to purchase the mill, but nothing has come out yet. They are saying maybe 4 to 6 weeks before they are able to close on the latest one that they've accepted. A lot of discussion went on biomass energy, but all the king's men and all the king's horses and all the tax credits in the world can't bridge the gap between 8 cents a kilowatt hour and 4 cents a kilowatt hour. It's about 8 cents a kilowatt hour is what they project it would cost to produce electricity using woody biomass. But when they closed the mill, the industry was plagued with excess capacity and declining demand. Has that changed? So we have a company that's putting all total about $6 billion into the acquisition of Smurfit Stone. Very interesting. Why did they do that? Well, this summarizes a presentation they gave to their shareholders and investors. They maintain that the containerboard, linerboard industry has become a very good business. U.S. virgin containerboard is a highly strategic global asset. That's a little different message than we've heard in the past. Smurfit's assets are much lower cost than before the transformation, and perhaps more ample opportunities to improve cost position through continued transformation of box plant system and investment in mills. So what I'm going to just mention here is that, is there an opportunity here? This is the company Rock 10 if they acquire Smurfit. The little triangles are box plants and the circles are paper and linerboard plants. There's obviously, what I'm saying is that with help from local officials, state officials, and congressional people, maybe we can put our foot in the door, talk to Rock 10 and say, there's a location in Montana that might serve those box plants that you acquired on the West Coast, which was one of the reasons for the Smurfit plant in the first place. A very interesting map that I think maybe illustrates an opportunity. So the assets that we have to bring to play here is that the mill, everything I've been told and from people who know this really well, was profitable. Fiber supply, our fiber supply may be getting better, and Todd Morgan knows a lot more about that. Working with local officials, the county, the city, the state, and congressional people, there's a very good incentive package that can be put together to help a buyer restore operation to that mill. And that includes workforce training and the other components, financing, the Montana Board of Investments, et cetera. What I've been impressed about is the willingness of local elected officials to sit down and get this on paper, and that's what we communicated to the buyers. We want to communicate that same message to Rock 10. It's a long shot, I grant you, but I think we probably should take the long shot. We have a skilled workforce available, and in the world of manufacturing, no new permits are needed. You can open this mill, and the permits are all in place. Is that an opportunity? Well, we'll see. There's other opportunities. I want to run through these quickly. University research at the University of Montana is an economic engine. We are involved with that through the business incubation facility called Montech. Have a company, a tenant company called Rivertop. They are green chemistry, and they're on the radar screen globally now. So the goal of our effort, the local community, the university, and the state, is to keep Rivertop in Montana rather than have them leave the state. You'll be hearing a lot more about this company in the future, I hope, as they look at an expansion and the development of their headquarters here. A very interesting company. One of their products replaces phosphate in detergent. That's a pretty good market. We're very pleased with the announcement on the Missoula Merck. There's a few people I've met since I've been here who still call it the Merck. So the Octagon Group has restored the name, and it's a big challenge to renovate that building. But the Octagon Group, from what we've researched their background and talked to them and met with them, they're up to the challenge. We have continued interest in the Bonner Mill site from several different industries. Nothing clear yet, but there's, as you know, Stimson Lumber's looking for a sale, and they are getting close. They keep their fingers crossed to the completion of the environmental cleanup there. I'll mention three companies here that I think are examples of some of the energy and opportunity that we have in our economy. Goomsy, some of you realtors know Goomsy. They've developed an app for your mobile phone for people who are in the housing market. So you go look at the house, you go look at a house, you go look at a house. If you're like me, when I did that a few years ago, my wife asked me, "What'd you see?" And I said, "Well, this one had a good garage." That's all I remembered. But now I can have my phone, I can bring it all up, and if I want to make an offer, I can use the Goomsy app, goes to the realtor, they can submit it, it gets turned down, then maybe 2 weeks later the seller lowers it, I get it right back on my phone. So that's a company here that's going to create about close to 20 new jobs, and they're marketing their product in, well, for example, the Colorado Association of Realtors and in California. So they're here in Missoula, and their market is, most of their market's outside of our state. It looks like they have a great future. Sustainable Business Systems is a small firm here. Many of you know about them. They're on a growth curve. They're expanding, and their focus is energy conservation, efficiency. And I think this company has shown that they have the expertise to solve a lot of problems, and we're delighted to see them grow and add some employment. Then an interesting company here, Advanced Technology Group, is it's a consulting firm that has several locations nationwide, and they chose to locate one here in Missoula. They're going to create about 20 to 25 new jobs here, and most of their work will be out of state. So what you see here with Goomsy and with Advanced Technology Group are people who choose to locate in Missoula and who are doing most of their sales coming from out of state. I think we need to understand why they're here and make sure we continue to provide that attraction. And then sustainable business systems has the potential of becoming a significant business in the region. So those are some examples. We're also very, the redevelopment of the historic sawmill site, the old Champion Mill site, 45 acres. That is nearing completion with a approval by the DEQ. I should knock on wood it gets all done, but it's, there's 45 acres there and the potential for a lot of commercial and residential development in the urban core. Then another small example is of revitalization is the Burn Street Nutrition Center in North Missoula, where farmers in the region will have a year-round market specializing in local food production in that facility, which was contaminated and now has been cleaned up. Well, so our economic development in Missoula has been the subject of a lot of discussion. Are we competitive? And the board of directors of our organization has been working very closely with the Missoula Economic Partnership, discussing how to bring this together. A capital raising campaign's been going on now for some time. This is important. This is really important that we increase our effort, improve our effort, and understand our opportunities and do the best to realize them, because our competition is not Billings or Great Falls or Missoula or Bozeman, excuse me. That's not really our competition. This is our competition. I don't know how well that shows up there, but if you go to a website called America 2050, they focus on the mega regions that are going to drive the American economy. Well, there's none of those mega regions that include our part of the country. We are close to one, relatively close, but the United States is anticipated to grow 140 million population by the year 2050. All of that population growth will take place in these mega regions. Many people would say all the economic growth will take their place as well. So how do we, as a smaller city in a rural state, compete for investment and economic opportunity, given that all the growth is occurring in these parts of the country? That's our competition, and that's how we need to think about it. This is the closest one. I thought this was very interesting. It's about 15 national foundations and think tanks that put this together, Ford Foundation and others. But Cascadia, obviously, it's international. It's Vancouver, Seattle, Portland. The vision for Cascadia puts those towns together, those cities, with high-speed rail while protecting the area's unique and pristine environment. Other strategies highlight these cities' shared high-tech competencies, commitment to environmental sustainability, and creative clusters in film, music, and green building. Well, you could take that language and write it for Missoula, I think. That's been cited as one of our opportunities. So we have to understand when we develop an economic development strategy where our opportunities lie in the face of these major trends. And I think real quickly I'll run through just some ideas that people are suggesting. So innovation drives competitiveness. For many years we relied on a growing labor force to generate increase in gross domestic product. So in the coming decade that's going to change. The growing labor force is not the situation in the United States in most areas. It's going to have to come from productivity. So the United States was cited as #1 in the world for labor market flexibility, higher education, a beneficial political environment for economic growth, innovative strategies, and quality of corporate management. Those are all strong things that we had in the past that we need to maintain. Here's what I think is relevant to our situation. Is these forecasts will only become true if we pursue an innovation and entrepreneurial economy with free-flowing global capital. How do we attract that capital to our economy? If we train and foster an educated workforce, including a diverse growing workforce. Education becomes fundamental to all this to be competitive. Balancing environmental and economic goals. In Montana, that's been an issue, and we need to make sure we do that well. And reinvest in infrastructure for energy, technology, transportation, water, sewer, et cetera, and knowledge sharing. These are all issues that have been cited and discussed in Montana, and this is from one of the major world think tanks citing these things. I think when you rank up Missoula to these, we have some assets that fit those priorities. And if we can bring together the Missoula Economic Partnership, work together, and look at this, I think our economic development effort can be very successful. Thank you.
It is noon, and that means it's lunchtime. Dick will be on our panel at lunch, so if you do have questions for him, I just say hold your questions until we have the panel. Dick King, Pat Barkey, Jim Foley, there's the one you haven't met, Executive Vice President, University of Montana. Then Paul Polzin, Scott Rickard. Once again, let's thank our statewide sponsors, Northwestern Energy, Benefice, Pacific Steel and Recycling, and our local sponsor, First Interstate Bank. All right, Jim, I want to address this to you first. We heard in Paul Polzin's presentation that state government, including the University of Montana, now occupies the #1 spot as the largest sector of Missoula's local economy. Tell me the significance of that from your perspective.
You would start with me first, huh? Let me...
You're the new guy.
Thanks for having me here today. It is significant to Missoula. I think anytime you have 15,000 students, of which 30% of them are from out of state, which, by the way, in the last couple of years has increased by 2,000 students, 2,600 of those students are affiliated with the College of Technology. We now do about $70 to $75 million in research money at the University of Montana, which are not what you refer to as earmarks. It's faculty competing with other world-class faculty that they're able to get these grants. It does have an impact on Missoula when you think about it being literally the largest employer, the largest economic engine we have in this community. In many of the communities across the state with the university system, it's similar, but particularly in Missoula with the University of Montana and in Bozeman with Montana State University, they are the largest economic engine in those communities by budget. We have a budget of about $375 million. You have all those students who come to the community, so not only do you not have any parking spots anymore, but they rent, they buy, they spend time in the community, and we take that very seriously. So yes, it's part of state government, but it is a major contributor to this community and frankly to Western Montana.
With Montana's population still continuing to grow very slowly, as I mentioned, we're not yet to 1 million people, will that out-of-state component grow more important, not only out-of-state, but perhaps foreign students, to keep those numbers up and keep the dollars coming in at that higher level of tuition?
You know, Ian, what we at the University of Montana want to do is maintain about that 30% level. The significance of the out-of-state students who come to the University of Montana and Montana State University is they pay 1.5 times that anybody that is a resident of Montana pays to go to school. So it's a significant part of the university budget. But we'll probably maintain about that level. We do hope to increase the number of Indian students on our campus. We have, not just from Montana, but from around the country. We currently have about 650. We'd like to get that to 1,000. We would like to increase our international programs and bringing international students to our campus. We think that diversity is important, not just to the University of Montana, but to the community and to the state. So the answer is we'll probably maintain about the same, but it is a significant portion of the university system budget.
Let me, while I've got you here, one more question. Provost Brown this morning spoke about the crowded conditions at the Missoula College of Technology. Can you give us any insight as to what might be happening, either short-term, mid-term? We know long-term we want a new campus, but what can we look for in perhaps this next year?
Yes, well, And I may be repeating a little bit what Provost Brown chatted about this morning, but the College of Technology is a campus that was built in the 1960s for 700 students. There are now 2,600 students over there enrolled. We have students in, I think it's 6 or 7 trailers, one of which they built themselves so they could have a classroom to have an instructor come and chat with them. The College of Technology is the #1 long-range building program building with the university system in the state of Montana. We think there will be a bonding bill go forward in the legislature in the next few days to be introduced by Representative Galen Hollenbaugh in the House and carried in the Senate by Senator Carol Williams that will include the College of Technology at $29 to $30 million to be built in the next year and a half. So we're still optimistic at the moment, but as all of you know, in a legislative process between now and the end of the 90 days, which is early part of May, all kinds of things can happen, but we're optimistic at the moment.
And the South Campus location is still the location?
The South Campus still is the location for the College of Technology facility. It would probably happen if we got the funding to do it within 6 or 8 months before we could have the bids go out, because we already have the money and we've done the planning and engineering on the facility already. So that's a general time frame. The level of money we receive from the legislature, if we receive it, could change. But the issue for us is going to be, is the state willing to take on a somewhere between $70 to $80 million in debt service for other buildings and facilities they want to put across the state? And that'll be the debate as we go forward. But right now, I'm very optimistic at the moment, and it could change, but I'm optimistic.
Paul Polson, compare for us the importance of UM and state government in Missoula County to the importance of state government and a major university in Gallatin County.
Well, thank you, Ian. That allows me to use a line that I used for about 25 or 30 years before PowerPoint was invented. And the line goes as follows. Turn to page 8 of your briefing book. Page 8 is Missoula County. U of M and other state government accounts for about 20% of Missoula's economic base. And on page 14, you see, or you can see that MSU and state government accounts for 30% of Gallatin County's economic base. So state government is more important in Gallatin County than it is in Missoula County, but the other reverse of that is that we have more non-university state government here, all those offices over there on Palmer Street. So state government is relatively more important in Gallatin County than it is here in Missoula County.
So in other words, Gallatin County, the university is the really big dog, whereas here we got the crime lab, we've got state lands, we got state forestry, all those other things that add in there. Scott Rickard, let me bring you into this. As a university community, we've got this transient population of students that come in and flow out and are gone after a few years. Tell me what that means for rental property, and both here, perhaps in Bozeman, other places.
Well, it is a significant component of the rental market, especially in the communities that have a larger percentage of the total population are students. I think one thing that we did see during the height of the housing boom was the fact that you saw a lot of parents that were purchasing rental properties for their son or daughter who was in college. They would purchase the property freshman year with the idea that the child could have some of their classmates, some of their friends rent it from them and then use that money, and then they would sell the appreciated property at the end of the time, at graduation time. Unfortunately, that value proposition fell apart quite a bit in the last year or two. If no other reason, if you start driving around Bozeman, around the university district, and a lot of those homes and condos also, you're seeing a big increase in that. And they represent a stable population for landlords within specific districts. I believe in Billings they're a little bit more distributed than they are in Bozeman or in Missoula, where I think they tend to be closer to the campus.
What has your research shown, and what has your research organization shown in terms of the growth of rental properties and rental units? I seem to recall a couple years ago that this was a great market in Missoula for rentals because there were so many units that were being built. Houses were being converted, buildings were being converted, there was new construction. I still see new multifamily units going up. Can you tell us kind of what the trend is and maybe how we fit in statewide?
Well, the trend in several of the metropolitan areas has been, you're right, an increase in the multifamily. Part of that was just due to perceived demand. Part of that was due to the time lag between when these projects would start and when they would actually hit the ground. Billings, for example, has seen a considerable increase in the number of rental units on the market. Now the question, more operative question, is how many of those are occupied at this point? I believe there's a bit of an overcapacity right now in the Billings market, especially relative to just even a few years ago. But I don't have occupancy data that actually gets me down to the level where I can tell you how big of an impact that is.
Fair enough. We will take questions from the crowd, so if you have a question, again, go to the microphones. Dick, I was intrigued by your chart showing the mega centers. I probably got the wrong term, but the areas where there's a tremendous amount of economic growth clustered in an area. At what point would you envision that West Coast, Northern Pacific, Cascadia area might start to actually spread so that we could be on the fringe of that?
Well, I think we're part of it right now because Missoula is more part of the Northwest than we are the Midwest. A big part of Montana, historically, Billings, that area, has close ties to the Twin Cities, Chicago, transportation ties, finance, et cetera. This part of the state has closer ties business-wise with Boise, Portland, Seattle, and I think that's an asset. That's a strength that we have, and if we understand that a lot of capital is going to gravitate toward these mega regions, because what do major investors look for? They look for where population growth is occurring, where opportunity. And what was interesting on this America 2050, they compare these mega regions to others across the world. So if you go to that website, it's a very interesting tool, and it's continually being updated. What the message is that a lot of rural areas in the world are going to lag behind. Is our community part of that rural area that's going to lag behind, or can we kind of hitch our wagon, benefit from that, be a place where tourism, for example, can even be a bigger part of our opportunity, as well as good-paying jobs for investment, high-tech companies, et cetera. So I think there's opportunity, and we have to understand what we have to offer, what we can do to maintain and improve that, and be a place where people can compete successfully.
I want to bring these two guys in to follow up on that, but I believe we have a question.
Hi, I'm with the Valley County group that has come up, and we have a nice little group here. And so we have a question regarding, it's been kind of tough in Valley County when you look at the unemployment rate for December at 10.4%. And so we're kind of struggling and have, a lot of things, but probably the most exciting and positive thing that's been happening is the Bitterroot College program at the university. And so my question is it looks like we'll have 350 students who are attending this spring semester. And I was just wondering if the numbers, Jim, you gave for the COT included those, or if those are in addition.
Those are included in the 2,600.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let me follow up on Dick's statement. Pat, based on what you know about economic centers and how economic growth and economic activity radiates from centers, what can we expect Montana's role, or what should Montana's role try to be as we try to be on the edge of that Cascadia region?
Well, there's a short answer and a long answer to that question. The long answer is a complete morning program. The short answer is I would first state, although this might sound controversial, I think it's true, there's really no such thing as a Montana economy. We're collector regions. And Dick has already mentioned some of the real important shades of gray as you go across the state. The second thing I would mention is that folks have been trying to understand why some regions grow and others don't for a long, long time. Why did Boise grow and Billings didn't at the same rate, et cetera, et cetera? It's a very difficult call to make, but there's a few things we can say which really dovetail to what Dick has already said. And that is growth is not only in urban areas and fringe urban areas, but it is mostly in urban areas and urban fringe areas. And my concern, as I'm sure there's concern in a lot of Montanans, is how much growth can be accommodated and yet still retain Montana's sort of frontier feel. So I think urbanization and growth go hand in hand. I'm not very good at picking winners. I'm not even very good at explaining why and how, but that is a very dominant theme of growth.
Let's move it over to Todd. Whether it's the Seattle area with Microsoft, whether it's the Research Triangle in North Carolina, whether it's, I think maybe a lot of Boise's growth was due to high-tech industry. I mean, we've got Semitool. We have the silicon plant outside Butte. Can we perhaps be the supplier of a lot of these items that are needed in a high-tech corridor or a high-tech megacenter? Can we expand that and do more?
Yes, Ian, I think there is an opportunity to expand manufacturing in those high-tech industries and other industries, other types of manufacturing, where you don't necessarily have to be right by the consumer, or because all the consumers aren't aggregated in one place, so to speak. Things that are maybe very high value that you can ship further away and not have to worry about transportation costs as much.
Is that the appropriate thing to look for? Is that where our niche might be? Or is there another niche we could fill? I think Dick mentioned tourism, but are there other niches that, and anybody could answer this, as a matter of fact, other niches that we could fill to help us support that region and bring prosperity here also?
I think wood products would be a niche that we could help fill. Actually, I mean, all joking aside, I mean, 3%, Montana produces about 3% of the softwood lumber used in the U.S. on an annual basis, and I think there is a potential here to maintain that and potentially increase it through time. But I mean, to some extent, we are limited by our, not by our distance to markets, because certainly there's a lot of lumber coming out of Canada that's traveling further than it would have to if it came out of Montana. But there's some things on the supply side in terms of public lands and public land policy that have impacted Montana's wood products industry.
Do you want to jump in? Oh, question, yes.
Yeah, thanks all the panelists and presenters today. It's been a great event this morning. A question for Dick King. Dick, you had mentioned in your presentation a list of some of the businesses that have recently decided to either relocate to or invest in Missoula, such as Octagon, Goomsey, et cetera. Could you elaborate a little on what factors some of these businesses have articulated as far as their reasons for wanting to invest in Missoula?
Go ahead and get it right close.
Would it surprise you if I said quality of life? What does that mean? What I'm hearing from these are the Octagon Group purchased both the Macy's building in Missoula and Boise. Boise being a larger economy, they see more opportunities for development of that property. So I asked them, what do they see the future of the building here? And their comment was, we see a place where people want to be, and that's going to create opportunity for both retail and other use. They didn't have anything specific, but they had faith in the community because of what they sense as an energy and an entrepreneurial spirit. I don't think that those of us in this room are surprised by that, but when someone from Charlottesville, Virginia, who's done projects like this in many other communities, comes out here and decides to purchase this property and put a lot of capital at stake, because they do not have any committed leases or sales yet. So they're risking, they're putting quite a bit at risk. That's a pretty good testimony that they see strength in our economy in not the traditional retail that was the prior use of the Macy's building, but a combination of retail and other use. They think they can make a good return on investment. And so one of the things they cited was University of Montana, the university athletics, cultural opportunities, and the diversity of the downtown atmosphere. They were very upbeat about all that. So what we have is a combination with those appeal to a lot of people. I mean, someone may be a very, very avid art lover and have a chance here to work with artists, see museums, and have establish a home base real quickly. Or they see the university athletic program as a great activity. So really, it comes down to a lot of cultural related activity that we're fortunate to have here as one of our strongest assets.
I know we have another question, but just bear with us, Paul.
It's very easy to identify new industries or new firms. How can we attract new firms and whatever? Those are very exciting topics to look at. But statistically, when you look back and try and explain economic growth in either Montana or Missoula or Ravalli County, it's not new firms or it's not new industries that explain economic trends. It's trends in existing industries, factories that are, industries that are adding workers, industries that are losing workers. So when we're trying to explain trends in the economy, don't forget the industries and the firms that you already have, because they are the major determinant of what has happened both statewide and at individual community levels.
We'll come back to that, but first let's get a question.
This is for Mr. Foley. I was wondering if you considered leasing a lot of these empty commercial buildings for the VOTEC on a temporary basis. And, it seems like it would help both the economy as well as VOTEC.
In all honesty, we haven't really explored that much. The great myth is that we actually purchased the current facility that we're in from the school district when it was the VOTEC, but we actually leased it from them for $1 forever. So we have a pretty good deal over there, even though it's the largest and fastest growing two-year entity in the university system. But as you know, the College of Technology is in 2 locations as well. One of them is out near Fort Missoula, which we call the West Campus. We're not going to move the heavy equipment to where the South Campus is, where the golf course is. It'll stay where it's at. There just isn't enough space in any facilities we've seen to be able to physically pick that footprint up and move it. And frankly, selfishly, maybe we really do think there ought to be a new facility because the placement rate out of the two-year institutions is 80, 85, 90%. They're fairly good, high-paying jobs, and the vast majority, 80 to 85% of those students stay in the state. So it's one we've explored, not in any great depth, though, in fairness.
And a question here.
Yes, between yesterday's presentation down in Hamilton from Dr. Swanson and today's information, it seems that housing, construction, real estate is going to be a very slow-growing climb out of the hole that we've been in. And in the past 5 years or so, it's been a significant part of the economy. And so my question is, given that the growth rates are going to will remain low, does that represent any functional or systemic change to our local economy? And does that represent any kind of a risk, or for those of us in those industries, do we need to adapt in any particular way?
Pat, you want to start this?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sure Scott and Paul might want to talk on this as well. Yeah, that's exactly correct. The housing market hasn't adjusted yet. It has not adjusted. While prices are still moving down, the incentive for new construction is really dampened. And of course, Scott mentioned foreclosures, and he mentioned the extraordinary impact foreclosures have on prices. So it's really like a big spring that has not done unwinding yet. And so it hasn't reached a resting point. We have looked at, for a number of years, the the impact of construction on different parts of the Montana economy in the boom years. And it clearly moved above trend in a number of communities. And you can see that in things like the service jobs, which are very closely tied to new construction. There was a graph in my presentation, and it was made to the cutting room floor, didn't have room for it. But if you look at the number of mortgage brokers working in the state of Montana, the enormous run-up, just exactly at the time you think, and the enormous fall that they've had in that industry. So is it going to come back to that enormous run-up? No, I don't think that level of construction prior to the recession is sustainable. So coming back means coming back some of the ways, I think, is my feeling.
Scott, you want to follow up? No? Okay. Paul?
No.
Okay. Well, then let me ask, and really anybody could chime in on this, but Paul, when you talked about the importance of the existing industries and existing business expanding and finding economic growth there, should I interpret that as saying Missoula may want to go for that one big score, but the one big score is not what we should be really putting our efforts toward?
That kind of decision, I think, is left to people like Dick King, who's far more experienced than that. But
Well, I was going to ask Dick anyway.
Just in terms of explaining what has happened long-term and short-term to both Montana's economy, Missoula's economy, Bozeman's economy, any of them, the sudden location of new businesses do not explain what is going on there. There's been trends in existing industries that explain both the long-term and the short-term. It does not mean that a new firm eventually does not have a local economic impact. Semi-2 up in Kalispell is a prime example. Started small and eventually became quite large. But when you're trying to explain economic trends, it's existing industries that give you the best explanation.
Well, Dick, how about the big score? Is it something we should still aspire to?
Some of us remember the efforts in Montana, like to go after the super collider. And several years ago at this event, I think I alluded to the Hail Mary pass, and to a football coach that said there's 3 things that can happen when you pass the football, and 2 are not good. So there's always a temptation to, in recruitment, to go after that large one, but recruitment has a definite role in an economic development effort, and we need to do better at that. But it needs to be targeted and strategic recruitment. In many cases, the companies that we have the good chance to bring here have a reason to be here already, or have a contact or a relationship, and they're interested in maybe coming here. We've got a couple of firms that are Montana-based that are now looking at expanding and looking at Missoula because they want to be here in this community. Those are the types of recruitment that has a higher percentage of success. They may not be as dramatic, but they're higher percentage of success and much more sustainable.
Jim, describe the role the university could play. I mean, we are doing this amazing amount of research. Could that research be the magnet that brings something very significant, or not necessarily just one firm or one employer, but a significant new sector to this part of Montana in that research, technology transfer, whatever you want to call it, developing new products and new processes?
It could be. I will say at the outset that we, not me specifically, but our folks around campus spend an enormous amount of time with economic development groups around the community, working together, both retaining and recruiting businesses from the beginning. And that includes everything from trying to put together curriculum that they may be interested in for professional development, to the idea of the kinds of research that we do on our campus and how it may integrate with the things they're doing in their businesses. So we've had a number of those discussions with Dick and the mayor and everybody else as those businesses have either come quietly or businesses were thinking about leaving. But the more important part for us is what we call the technology transfer. Much of the research we do on campus sometimes seems like does it ever get to what I call in layman's terms production, where it can create jobs and have people affiliated with it, whether in this community or someplace else. And we now have hired a full-time tech transfer person who understands that process very well. There are a couple of companies, including one that you're maybe familiar with called Rivertop, which we're working very closely with, which could possibly increase their number of jobs. We're not talking 1,000 or 500, but we are talking somewhere between 10 to 30 to 40 new jobs. And that begins to have an impact on a community when you think about healthcare. And by the way, these are jobs that are not minimum wage jobs. These are very good, high-paying jobs with PhDs and master's folks who come from oftentimes the university system in Montana, not just the University of Montana. So in a general way, we can do better. We know that, but we're actively and aggressively working with the local economic development groups to be part of that tech transfer, to take our research from the labs and the classrooms and get it into productivity where it actually creates jobs. I will also say, and maybe this just should go unsaid, but because they created it on the University of Montana, we do have part ownership of the business as it goes forward. Because they created it in our classrooms at the expense of public dollars, and we feel like we should have part ownership in that, again, to go back to the campus to be used to benefit faculty and students.
And you're actually a little late jumping on that bandwagon. Other universities have done that for a long time.
We are a little late jumping on that bandwagon, but and again, it's not me, it's the tech transfer person, but I can tell you he's extremely aggressive on that.
I will share one small thing about Rivertop Renewables, because I worked a little bit with the woman that put together the recruitment video for their employees. And one of the things, Dick, that she wanted to make sure was included in that video is that if people are going to move to Missoula, it's not just quality of life and the availability of recreation and so forth. They wanted to know that the stores they were familiar with are also here, and that they can do the kind of shopping that they are used to doing in their hometown. Can you describe sort of the role that plays in our self-promotion to show that, hey, we're a pretty sophisticated place, even though we've got all this cool local stuff, we also have the things that you have in your hometown?
I'm probably the wrong one to answer that question. My wife might be a better source. I've heard it said a few months ago, a lady here in Missoula that I respect a lot, she said, we need to get Kohl's to come. Kohl's needs to come to Missoula. I see some people nodding their heads. I have never shopped at Kohl's, but what Ian's saying is that it takes a balance. You have to have a vibrant downtown with unique, small retail, boutique types of stores, and that creates that energy and that activity. At the same time, pay attention to the rest of the retail sector. And Paul has pointed out that Missoula's retail center, we had tremendous growth for many years, and that's now leveled off, I think, Pat, is a fair statement, because of competition from other communities in the region. Do we need to attract other brand name retail stores? I would put that as a question. And I've often told people, well, take a second look at the community and see what's here. We have some brand names that they recognize, obviously. We have some we don't. But if you go to Southgate Mall, you will see names there that many people across the country will recognize. And if you go to North Reserve, the same thing. We don't have all of them, but we have a significant number. And so growth in the community will keep what we have. I just don't see retail growth as being a driver of the economy in the future. That's based on national data that talks of we're the most, on a square footage basis, the most over-retailed country in the world. We have 3 times as much retail space as the next country in the world, which is Sweden. So there's contraction going on in retail. How does that translate to our economy? I think we've done pretty well to keep what we have, but you tell people, spend some time here, go to some of these other places that maybe aren't quite as obvious, but we have a significant retail opportunity, both small scale and large scale.
Todd, let me bring you back in. I know during your presentation you said your favorite part of manufacturing, your favorite sector is food and beverage. And we have seen some legitimate big success stories here with the food and beverage manufacturing industry. In beer, I mean, High Country Jerky in Lincoln. High Country Jerky, they may still market internationally. I remember when they were testing the Japanese market. The value-added ag products that actually fall under manufacturing. Tell me about, I guess, the potential and either the things that may encourage growth there or the things that may put a cap on that.
Well, again, kind of the pluses and negatives. Distance to market might be an issue for some of the food manufacturers if they're going to be and try to be a mass producer of something that they want to sell all over the U.S. or all over the world in large quantities. That could be a drawback. Local manufacturer of food and beverage products for local consumption, and I think that beer is a perfect example in the bakeries we have here in Missoula especially, is a niche market that a lot of people have said, wow, I like having good beer and I like having good bread and other baked products. And that they can develop in pretty much any community. Will the micro beer growth trend continue? All right, what was it, Paul's quote? You know, nothing that can't last forever, it seldom does, or something. So it's almost like a Yogi Berra quote. But yeah, I don't know that will go on forever, but it has been a great success story, and I think it is something that can be replicated and has been replicated in other communities around Montana in terms of the microbrewery craze or trend. And I personally enjoy going to different towns in Montana and having local beers, as I'm sure a lot of people here do. Other agricultural products that we may have an advantage in could be things like, well, certainly not corn, as George mentioned. Corn's not something we grow a lot of, but we do have like the seed crops that don't require a lot of irrigation. So the oilseed crops might be a potential. And sugar beets have been one that have been for creating sugar. So certainly something that in Montana's endured through time.
Well, we are almost to 1 o'clock, so I'm going to let Mr. Barkey have the final word here. As people go forth from here and try to digest everything that they've heard, I guess give them the bottom line takeaway message from here.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've obviously been a presenter here, but I've also been a listener. And this panel has been wonderful, and I commend you for just doing an outstanding job and really contributing to this program. I think in listening, I certainly learned that our concerns are primarily local. But there's been an awful cold wind blowing here lately, the last few years. And of course, that didn't start in Missoula. It's called the recession. And I think it remains the dominant story in our minds, not only for ourselves, but for our kids and for our friends and so forth. And that is, where the heck are we in this recession? And what I take out of this as the dominant message of this program is that we're switching gears. We are a forward-looking organization in the Bureau. We're looking ahead. So we know things were tough last year, but looking ahead, the message is that we're moving to a faster pace of growth. Is it enough to cure all our problems? Absolutely not. But it's going to chip away at them, and it's something that we should be aware of. We kind of put the economy up here on a hoist in this program. We take it all apart. We disassemble it. We're looking at coals and microbrews and all kinds of things, and these, of course, are what are important. But the essence of this program is what direction is the big aircraft carrier, which is the huge economy we're part of, moving. And like I say, I think we're climbing to a slightly higher altitude.
And is it fair to say this is not just positivity for positivity's sake?
Oh, anyone that's ever heard an economist talk knows that that's never the case.
Well, thank you. As Yogi Berra said, it ain't over till it's over, but it's over. Thanks a lot for coming. Enjoy it. Be safe going home.